California man heads out to get the mail with his dog. The pooch returns without him. Worried that something has happened to his father, the following morning, a son calls police to report him missing. The events over the next few days can only be described as the most surreal set of circumstances imaginable. As police find blood and the scent of human remains inside the family home, all eyes point toward the son as a vicious murderer. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the true crime author of close to 50 books. I've dedicated the past 20 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. It's late evening. Dark outside. A gorgeous August night in 2018 in Southern California. Papa Tom Perez Sr. leashes his dog for a short walk out to the mailbox to fetch the day's mail. Such a routine, repetitive task many of us do without even thinking. Margosia, the Perez family dog, soon wanders back to the house without Papa Tom on the other end of the leash. Papa Tom's son, Thomas Perez Jr., immediately senses that something is off when he finds Margosia wandering around aimlessly, her leash dragging on the ground. The dog is also acting anxious and fidgety. So Thomas Jr. takes a look around the house and then goes outside. There's no sign of Papa Tom anywhere. Thomas then heads over to the neighbors. Perhaps Papa Tom stopped by for a late-night chat. No, they say. They haven't seen him. So Thomas heads off to a nearby park where Papa Tom sometimes liked to take a walk. But still no Papa Tom. Papa Tom is in his 70s. He speaks very little English. He and his son have been living together for quite some time and had an argument earlier that day. Papa Tom has been known in the neighborhood to be somewhat of a ladies' man. He likes to chat it up with the local single women. And he also has a girlfriend. All important facts in this case. Thomas considers that perhaps his dad met up with one of his lady friends, and they are off having some fun. So he decides to take the dog in, get some sleep, and not worry. Papa Tom is a grown man. He can take care of himself. In the morning, he'll have a little conversation with his dad. He'll ask him to let him know the next time he decides to take a late-night stroll. Simple. Communication. The following morning, Thomas gets up and begins looking around the house for Papa Tom. Papa Tom had never come home. Where the Perezes live in Fontana, California, the neighborhood is mostly suburban. Fontana is inland, directly east of Los Angeles, about a 50-minute ride, not far from Riverside. After looking around a bit more, Thomas feels it's time to call in the police. Papa Tom has never taken off like this, nor has he been gone so long without letting his son know. According to Officer Joanna Pena, when Fontana police received the call from Thomas, she says he comes across distracted and unconcerned with his father's sudden disappearance. So Pena, along with her supervisor, Corporal Sheila Foley, decide to head out to the Perez house. They want to speak with Thomas, see what's going on there. Once at the house, they become increasingly concerned about Papa Tom's well-being. Thomas Jr. is a bit antsy and nervous, growing more worried by the hour about his father. But he's also agitated, which they judge to be a red flag. The younger Perez is all wound up. Papa Tom has never done this sort of thing before. Thomas Jr. says he's called his sister, and she has not heard from Papa Tom either. Fontana police officers ask Thomas if he might come down to the station house to answer some questions and get an official missing person case filed. He says absolutely no problem. Then they ask if they can take a look around the property and inside the house. Go right ahead, Thomas Jr. says. Sounds like a guy with nothing to hide. Without saying as much, both officers are thinking only one thing. Thomas Perez Jr. knows something. As Thomas heads off to the station, Fontana police search the Perez house. They also bring in a canine to sniff around. During this initial search, Fontana police believe there are bloodstains on the carpet leading up the stairs. Then the dog hits on what it is trained to: human remains. With those two discoveries, Thomas Perez Jr. quickly goes from witness to suspect. Inside the Fontana PD, Thomas sits, waiting for the police to ask him questions. He's by himself. He's even more anxious now. It feels like something has happened to his father, and no one seems to be telling him what's going on. Struggling with a few psychological issues, Thomas Jr. is on daily medication to keep it all under control. Only he left his medication at home, no doubt thinking he'd answer a few questions, fill out some paperwork, be back to go look for Papa Tom himself. Two detectives now get involved. First thing they do is stall talking to Thomas so they can secure several additional warrants to search through Thomas's electronics to see what he has been up to. At some point that day, the two detectives walk into the small interview room where Thomas is sitting and waiting. Thomas is growing more and more anxious as the day wears on. The room is windowless, colorless. There's a small table, several chairs. Stuffy and no bigger than a walk-in closet, Thomas soon realizes he is in an interrogation room and is beginning to fall apart emotionally. "I need my medication," he tells them. The detectives, David Janis and Kyle Guthrie, from the Fontana PD, are calm and rather laid back. In due time, they tell him, you will get your medication. They just want to ask a few questions. Thomas had waited a total of 16 hours before calling police to report that his father is missing. One could puzzle out from that information that he used the time to murder his father and dispose of his remains, clean up any mess he made, and prepare himself psychologically for what was ahead. The alleged odor of human remains and a bloodstain on the carpet seem to back up this theory. So this is what the two detectives are really hyper-focused on. They know, in their minds, they got their guy. After a time, one of the detectives comes out and says, "We know you killed your father." "You're nuts," Thomas says. He is now unwinding, like a spool of live wire. He's shaking, he's nervous, he's crying, his eyes are darting back and forth between the two of them. "You're absolutely nuts," he says again. Thomas continues to tell them he is taking medication for anxiety and depression, a condition which will become more exaggerated by the hour without his pills. He needs that medication. Janis and Guthrie blow off Thomas's concern and stay focused on getting Thomas to admit what he's done to Papa Tom. Then they bring in the family dog, and they have the dog sit next to Thomas on the floor. Quote, "Was it under the influence of those medications that you killed your father?" one of the detectives then asks. Thomas denies any involvement in his father's disappearance or death. They continue to question him for hours. They just have this gut feeling, and they're going with it. Thomas Perez Jr. murdered his father. That's what they're going on, according to a transcript in the court record. "That medication you're taking has caused you to have some issues," one detective suggests. "Where can you take us to show us where Daddy is? The medication, it took over, and we need to find Daddy right now," the other detective says. They're speaking to Thomas Jr. as if he's a child. I want to point that out. No, Thomas says. "Come with us," they tell Thomas. He gets up. They all walk out of the room. By now it's early morning, the following day. Thomas has been at the police station throughout the night. He's missed several doses of his meds. Janis and Guthrie escort Thomas to a police vehicle, put him in the back, and begin driving around Fontana. "We need you to show us where Daddy is," they keep asking him. They begin to drill into Thomas now with detailed questions about where he dumped his father's remains. Thomas continues to repeat that he has no idea. As they drive, both detectives insist that Thomas knows what happened. Remember, they claim to have a canine hitting on human remains and a blood stain on the carpet leading up the stairs. At one point, they change their tactic a bit. "We know you killed your father," one of them says, "but maybe you don't even remember." "I need medical attention," Thomas insists. "I need my medication. Please," he begs. "We are not going to the hospital. Take us to where Daddy is." This goes on and on and on. Thomas denies any knowledge of where his father could be. Yes, they had an argument. Yes, it was heated. But no, I did not kill my father. Janice and Guthrie decide to head back to the station house where they will begin to apply serious pressure. Please subscribe to Crossing the Line wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to leave a review of the show, especially on Apple Podcasts. I'm doing this show independently now, free from any corporate or big podcasting media company involvement, which allows me to bring you more of the content you want to hear and have asked me for. This is completely our show. Reviews and subscriptions really help. You are my public relations and social media team now, and without your help, I could not do this. And that support, I must tell you, means everything. It's incredibly humbling, and I want to thank each one of you for listening. We can grow this show together, which will allow me to do even bigger things with it. If you go to crossingtheline.biz or mwilliamphelps.com, you can contact me there to suggest cases or just say hello. And look for me across all social media platforms at @MWilliamPhelps. That's the @ symbol in my name, M. William Phelps. What happens next in this missing person case is truly unbelievable. And I don't use that phrase loosely here. It is incredibly unbelievable. So let's take our first break, come back, and get into that. Police interrogation is an art, a careful dance between a suspect and law enforcement. Most cops who conduct interrogations know what they are doing, how high to push the bar, and, most important, when to drop certain information into the conversation in order to elicit a response or reaction. I participated in a series called The Interrogation Tapes, which you can find on Hulu if you choose. This show uses videotaped interrogations with murder suspects to outline how these types of interviews are, at least early into them, a give and take. You give the suspect a little reach, maybe an out, they give you a little back. But as a suspect, you need to be feeding law enforcement some sort of information. The one certainty within this back and forth is that police understand the more time that goes by, the more tired and mentally fatigued a suspect becomes, the better the chances are of breaking that suspect down. Thomas Perez Jr. has been questioned all throughout the night, with breaks to allow him to use the bathroom and think about what he wants to say. They had even taken Thomas to a diner and fed him, allowed him to have some coffee. But he is now back inside the interview room at the Fontana police station with Janice and Guthrie sitting across from him, and he is becoming more unglued as each minute passes. Thomas continually stresses the need for his medication. Janice and Guthrie do not respond to his request. Thomas Perez is now almost 24 hours into being unmedicated, and now he's a broken man. "I feel ill," Thomas says at one point. "We know you killed your father," one of the detectives says. "You are nuts," Thomas pleads through an anxious cry. "Daddy's dead because of you. You murdered your father." "I didn't." "Yeah, you did." No. They then tell Thomas they have proof. They have evidence that he did it. One of the detectives gets up and leaves the room at that point. By now, Thomas is crumbling into a shell. He tears at his blue shirt from his chest, ripping the buttons, like Superman stripping from Clark Kent into the superhero. He slides down in his chair, nearly falling off onto the floor. He grabs at his hair, pulling it, screaming out in pain. The detective who had left comes back, and once again they bring in Margosha, the family dog. "We want to show you how traumatized the dog is," the detective says, explaining further that the dog had witnessed the murder and actually trekked through blood, leaving bloody paw prints everywhere. No, is all Thomas could say. "Yes, and we're going to have to euthanize the dog because of that trauma," they tell him. "Please, I didn't do this," he pleads. Janice and Guthrie both get up at this point and allow Thomas to spend some time alone with the dog. He lies on the floor next to the dog. The implication here is, spend some last minutes with your beloved family dog because you'll never see her again. Quote, "We're going to allow you to say goodbye to her," one of them says before they leave the room. Thomas Perez has folded into himself. He's entirely fried mentally. And detectives understand. They got him. He's ready now to confess. It had been a matter of breaking him down and outlasting him. Detectives go through this back and forth all the time. They know suspects can hold out for a long time, but not forever. Fontana PD detectives, Janice and Guthrie, then bring in one of Thomas's closest friends and explain to him that they have irrefutable evidence his friend, Thomas Perez Jr., killed his father, and the best way for all of this madness to end would be for Thomas to confess. So they asked the friend to go into the interrogation room and convince Thomas to admit to what he did. Get this thing over with. Thomas's friend is mortified. He'd never known Thomas Jr. to have issues with his father or to be violent in any way. This is shocking news. But if police have hardcore evidence he killed Papa Tom, it must be true. Janice and Guthrie reassure the friend they have overwhelming evidence of Thomas's guilt. So they're holding back. What they're saying is, we've got the goods. We want Thomas Jr. to tell us. They monitor the meeting between the two friends from another room. "Tom," the friend tells him, "you are in very, very big trouble. You need to remember what you did. They are charging you with murder." The friend is unable to reach Thomas. "I didn't do it." He keeps repeating this. "I didn't do it." In the hallway outside the interrogation room, Thomas's friend overhears detectives talking. So he asks them what's going on. Have they found Thomas Perez Sr.'s body? What they tell the friend makes him want to head right back into that room and have another chat with Thomas. "I want to speak to him again." Janice and Guthrie tell him no. He cannot see Thomas again. Not possible. Detectives head back into the room to speak with Thomas. "Your father is dead. You don't remember. Because of the medication you are on, you probably blanked it out." "No," he continues to say, "no. We're trying to help you here. I did not kill my father." Then Janice moves his chair right over next to Thomas and starts whispering to him. The detective seems empathetic, almost sympathetic. Thomas is by now completely out of it psychologically. He goes from folding his arms to tearing at his hair to gritting his teeth, clearly having no control over his emotions. "We recovered the body," Janice and Guthrie tell Thomas. "Listen," Thomas says. He is now subdued, quiet, calm. "Maybe we fought," Thomas Perez Jr. says, "and I punched him in the face. Maybe I stabbed him with scissors in the belly. Maybe I rolled his body in a shower curtain. I killed him," Thomas Perez Jr. admits. Let's take our final break here. Come right back. And trust me, where this is going, you've never heard anything like it. Thomas Perez Jr. has just admitted to killing his father. He mentioned a shower curtain, scissors, stabbing the old man in the belly. All of this is what detectives Janez and Guthrie had suggested to Thomas after explaining to him how he had done it. Thomas assumes they know how the elder Perez was murdered because they had told him they found Thomas Perez Sr.'s body. Janez and Guthrie have what they now need to charge Thomas with murder. They get up and leave the room. Thomas reaches down, undoes the laces to one of his shoes, makes a slip knot, and proceeds to try to hang himself on the small desk in front of him. He cannot live with killing his father. The shoelace breaks. Meanwhile, Fontana police drive the crime scene bus over to the Perez residence and set up shop for a massive crime scene search and seizure. They rip through the Perez house, cutting up furniture, moving appliances, removing the contents of drawers and closets, dumping everything on the floor, presumably in search of evidence to bolster their case against Thomas Perez Jr. They spray a luminol-like substance all over the house, hoping to find out where Thomas murdered his father. It's now about 35 hours after Thomas Perez Jr. had first reported his father missing. It's August 9th, close to 9 p.m. Thomas's sister, Papa Tom's other child, who lives in Northern California, calls into the Fontana police and says she's heard they are looking for Papa Tom. They tell her yes, they are. He's fine, she says. Fine? The fuck is she talking about? Apparently, Papa Tom had gone out that night. He went to get the mail and decided to visit a lady friend. Early the next morning, as Thomas Jr. was being interrogated at the police station, Papa Tom went to LAX, the airport, boarded a flight, and flew up to see his daughter. He's at the airport right now, the daughter tells police. He's on his way home. Papa Tom had forgotten to bring his cell phone. Fontana police then head out to LAX, lights and sirens blazing. And there he is. Papa Tom, alive and well. So, of course, what do? They detain Papa Tom and read him his rights. Papa Tom is arrested. Not only had they bullshitted Thomas Jr. into a false confession, literally driving him crazy by mental torture, but then they arrest his father. Okay, not over yet. With Thomas Jr. still at the Fontana PD, instead of admitting they'd made a terrible mistake, they refused to tell Thomas that his father is alive. Instead, they do what is called, and also, by the way, one of my favorite Van Halen records, a 5150, committing Thomas to a psych ward for a 3-day evaluation. They drop him off and explain to doctors at the hospital that the dad is alive and well, but nobody is allowed to talk to Thomas about it. The hospital doesn't tell Thomas his father is alive. So for 3 days, Thomas Perez Jr. thinks he killed his father, and he's now been put into a psychiatric hospital because of it, and he has no idea what's going on. Margosia is at a nearby animal shelter, slated to receive her punishment in all of this. Death. They're going to kill the dog. For 3 days, until he is released, Thomas has no idea Papa Tom is alive and well and at home. That friend they had brought in to help elicit a confession then picks Thomas up and takes him home to see Papa Tom. Alerted that the family pooch has literally hours left to live, they rush down to the shelter where Margosia is and pick her up. Fontana police still aren't done, however. Close to a week later, they obtain an additional search warrant for the GPS in Thomas's car. It's cleanup time now. Time to save face and blame the Perez family for their utter torture of this poor guy and his family. What I want to know is this. Where is the probable cause for this warrant? What freaking idiot judge or prosecutor would sign off on such fucking nonsense? Detectives berate the guy, drive him to the point of insanity where he believes he killed his father, And now they won't let up? They are hell-bent on proving it has all been a mix-up and the Perez family is to blame. Police can lie. That's just the way it is. They can make shit up and tell you things that are not true. That's why it's important not to say anything and request a lawyer, whether you've done something or not. They bullied and threatened a confession out of a guy who did absolutely nothing other than to report his father missing. They took absolute advantage of his mental illness. And I want to say the blood stain they're talking about on the carpet, I've seen pictures of this. We're talking about a dot that looks like it's 5 years old. Fontana police eventually dropped their obsession with trying to find some sort of crime connected to the Perez family and leave them alone. Thomas Perez, however, hires a lawyer and sues the police department. Takes years, but Thomas Perez is awarded a $900,000 settlement, which sounds like and looks like a lot of money. I feel is pretty damn close to nothing, considering what this guy and his family went through. That's it for this week. Remember, I need your help. Please subscribe to Crossing the Line wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget, leave a review of the show, especially on Apple Podcasts, and log on to crossingtheline.biz or mwilliamphelps.com to contact me and suggest cases, or just say hi. And look for me across all social media platforms using the @ symbol and my name, M. William Phelps. Thank you for supporting this show. I am allowed to do it because of you, and that truly means more to me than I can say. Be safe, be aware. Sources for today's episode include Fontana Police Got Him to Admit to a Murder That Never Happened by Jessica Garrison and Anita Chabria, Los Angeles Times, June 1st, 2024. Psychologically Tortured by Sam Levin, May 24th, 2024, The Guardian. I also reviewed court record and interrogation tape transcripts. CTL is produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, written and executive produced by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.